Yeah, I always make a joke. My husband will say, Amberly, you're the one that says get rid of the doggy downers and stick with the puppy uppers if he can tell like there's even somebody in the family that's like bringing me down. But it's so true. Like there is nothing more powerful than being surrounded by like-minded people who are passionate and they're go-getters and they're not gossiping and they're focused on the good and they're focused on moving forward and they're focused on solutions and they're focused on collaborating. It's important to look at the people that you're surrounding yourself with, and that's not just the people that are in your life, but even the people on social media.
You're listening to part 2 of my amazing conversation with Amberly Lago. If you haven't yet listened to part 1, be sure to check that one out first. Now, without further ado, here's part 2 with the amazing Amberly Lago. I had a medical scare maybe a little over 10 years ago. I was sick. I wasn't feeling well. And it was more than the flu. I just was unable to get up. I was divorced. I didn't have a girlfriend, so I had no one there to really be with me. And then on a Sunday morning, I felt I could hardly breathe. So I called my ex-wife, who I'm very close to, and I said, yeah, I'm not feeling well. I think I need to go to the hospital. She only lives a mile away, and she was on a bike ride. She said, call your doctor. So I called my doctor at 8 a.m, and this is kind of crazy. I only had his phone number. You know, doctors don't like to give you their phone number, right? So he had held a fundraiser for Eric Garcetti, who eventually became our mayor here in Los Angeles and who also became a good friend. He was on my show. He's now the U.S. ambassador to India, but he was running for city council the first time. I didn't know him. And my doctor invited me to something at his house. I had the phone number on it. So, all right, I'm going to keep the phone number down. I'm going to save it for a rainy day. Hopefully I'll never need it. So on Sunday morning, I waited till 8 o'clock. I called him. He was all groggy, and he basically said, what, who? He said, do you know what time it is? And he hung up on me. So I'm thinking,
God.
shit, I better go to the hospital. So I called 911, and I was embarrassed, right? And because, I was 30, how old was I? 43 at the time, and in the best shape of my life. And the EMS comes, and I made it downstairs. I hadn't been downstairs maybe 3 times in 3 days. And they give you this shot that if you're having a heart attack, that makes you feel better and it eases the tension. And so I said, all right, guys, I feel great. I feel better. Thank you. I'll see you later. And they said, oh, no, we're going to the hospital. And I'm in the ambulance, and they're doing a EKG the entire time, checking my blood pressure, and you can see they were worried. I mean, it was all a blur, but you could kind of see, all right, what's going on? And then I get out, and it's like you see on TV. There's a bunch of people waiting for you, right? They take you onto the gurney, and then and then the doctor said I was having a heart attack, and I said, that's not possible. And he said, why not? And so I said to him, because I go to Soul Cycle 3 days a week. And so he said, well, I'm the chief of cardiology here, and you're having a heart attack. So sign here. And they started wheeling me away. And I thought, oh my God, like, this is crazy. I had my phone. I called my ex-wife. My kids were young. They were in school. I called my mom. She didn't answer. And I called a doctor friend. I had nobody.
Gosh.
And it's like, you go into that room and you think, gosh, you may die. And I couldn't say goodbye to anyone. And so you're in that room, and I asked my doctor whether I was going to die. And he said, no. But, doctors lie all the time to make you feel better, right? They want to give you hope. And if I wasn't...
How old were your kids at the time?
They were maybe 7 and 5. And so I was in the this room, and they robotically, they put a stent in, and they said, well, I have good news and bad news. You're not having a heart attack, but what the symptoms you have present exactly the same, and the 1% chance where it's not, you have something called myocarditis. And I said, what's that? And it's an infection of the heart. And I said, well, what's the bad news? And he said, well, the bad news, it could be fatal. And so, and there's no cure for it. There's nothing you can do. Your body rests, and it's going to make it or it's not going to make it. So I was in the ICU for a few days. And, I was the youngest person up there by at least 40 years. I mean, people were very old around me. And
I bet.
I made it. And then the weirdest thing is, I started my career as a lawyer, and I was a second year lawyer. And when they hire the first year, you're no longer the youngest person. So there was a woman named Christine. We became great friends. We would have lunch all the time. And a week after I got out of the hospital, she died. And I thought, gosh, this is, crazy. We were no longer good friends. We sort of lost touch. She married a friend of mine, and we would see each other at Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur services. We belonged to the same temple. And I went to the funeral, and I thought, gosh, that could have been me in that casket. And I just was so grateful for life. And I learned later that she died of myocarditis. So just like,
no. How do you get that? Like, what is it caused from?
Nobody knows. I know there was an increase in myocarditis due to COVID. It's interesting. I had all these doctors come into my room when I was sitting there, and they closed the door and said, all right, how much cocaine have you done? In the past month?
Are you serious?
And I've never done cocaine, ever. Never done drugs of any kind.
I'm too scared of it.
Ever.
I've never
ever
done it.
Ever. And just one doctor after the other, and they're coming. It was rare, and you had all kinds of doctors coming in, and the students were coming in. You're kind of like that showpiece, and here's a patient that has myocarditis. But it's I do attribute my ability to live based on the physical shape I was in, and the fact I was in very, very good shape. But ultimately, my friend Christina, who died, was a runner. I mean, she ran a lot. She was in phenomenal shape too. So some days it's your turn, some days it's not your turn. But
yeah, my husband always says, you know what? God's got your ticket. And he always tells me, he's like, you know what? God just keeps spitting you back out. He just keeps spitting you back out, because I've been in ICU so many times. And it's interesting that you had doctors come in and ask you, so how much cocaine have you done? I had one of the first doctors that came in and talked to me when I woke up out of a coma was like, hey, he leaned over and he said, hey, this is a question. It's just between you and me. He said, but do you abuse drugs, or do you regularly use drugs? And I said, no, sir. I said, I've never done drugs. I said, I never even take aspirin. And he goes, are you an athlete? And I kind of thought, well, can't you tell I'm an athlete? Like, and he goes, we had a real hard time keeping you knocked out in a coma. He said, you have so many endorphins, we couldn't keep you down. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. I said, oh yeah, I ran 11 miles in my best time the day of my accident. But the power of endorphins, or they're like a drug, but like a healthy drug. But yeah, that doctor came up to me, Dr. Razul, one of my favorite doctors, and he said that, and we've had an amazing relationship. He has recently passed away, but good man. But they assume, well, you must be doing drugs, or you must be doing this or that, and yeah, but it's wild.
Let's talk about what it did to you mentally as well as some of the side effects that it had and some of the behaviors that it led to. You were depressed. You became an alcoholic. You lost your home.
Hmm.
How bad did it get? And did you ever think about killing yourself?
Yeah, I did. I was never a partier. In fact, I moved from Texas to California and thought I'm going to make something of myself. I am so not like a lot of the other people in my family that have problems with addiction, and I'm going to make something of myself. And so I was always the go-getter and the high achiever and worked hard. And then when I could not get out of pain with all these treatments that I was doing, and I mean, we had $2.9 million worth of medical expenses. I had spent thousands, I think $20,000 on ketamine infusions just to go get infused with ketamine to try to reboot your nervous system. Like nothing was working. And I remember one day having a glass of wine and how it kind of numbed out the pain, not just physically, but it helped me feel like I could stuff down some of the emotions. And I remember thinking, wow, why didn't the doctors just tell me to knock back a glass of wine? Because this sure helps. And I remember thinking, well, this being in the fitness industry, and I was sponsored by Nike and doing infomercials with Body by Jake and uh, fitness videos and on the cover of magazines and contributing to Shape and Health magazine. And now I'm like, well, this can't be the healthiest thing to do, but if it's what I have to do every day just to get through the pain, then I guess I'll have to do it. And that worked until it didn't, until I realized I was physically, mentally, in every way dependent upon alcohol just to get through the day. And I remember going to my husband and saying, I think I have a problem. And him being a cop, he was like, no, 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 you don't have a problem. I was like, no, I think I do. I think I need to go to AA. And he goes, no, you don't want to be around those people. I mean, he was used to arresting people that had drunks and stuff. And he was like, how could I be married to an alcoholic? And he said, you know what? Anybody would drink if they had to deal with as much as you're going through. But I knew deep down that I had a problem. Like I knew deep down this was not right and I needed help. And so I Googled recovery programs and I found a 12-step program that when my husband was at work and my daughter was at school, I could go to this recovery program. It was the scariest thing I'd done, to admit that I had a problem and then the courage to ask for help. But it was at that moment where I was ready to die. I was like, just don't let me wake up. This is just too much for me to bear. But it was my daughters, and it was having that little, thinking of them and how I didn't want to do anything to hurt them. And I wanted to be an example of resilience for them, that really pulled me through and gave me that little bit of courage to get on my knees and pray. And I prayed, and that gave me the courage to find a meeting and go to a meeting. And to this day, I still go to meetings, and that's how that's how I've been sober.
I had a girlfriend who I dated for 2.5 years who was an alcoholic, and I've been to at least 50 AA meetings, and it's really remarkable what goes on in that room. And it usually is only when people hit rock bottom that they will actually go, and it's transformative, like you said, for a lot of people. A lot of people don't get sober. A lot of people, as you know, do get sober. And I think the one takeaway that I have, well, there's many takeaways. One of the takeaways is if you think you have a drinking problem, you probably do.
If you have to ask yourself, I wonder, do I have a drinking problem? That you probably do.
It's a good
It's
sign.
so true. Yeah.
Talk to us about resilience and the importance of being resilient in our success and overcoming incredibly challenging obstacles, including medical problems and mental health issues, including depression.
Well, I think that we all have resilience within us, and it's just our ability to tap into that so we can, decide to take action and thrive. And so for me, it's not just about resilience mentally, but it's resilience physically, spiritually, emotionally. And so um, there's things that I do every single day that help me to be resilient because I wake up in the morning and from the minute I take my first step, sometimes without even taking a step, I'm like, ooh, how bad is this pain going to be today? Like, how bad is it going to be? Am I going to be able to walk? Am I going to be able to get through today? And so I immediately start by shifting my perspective with gratitude. And I've actually come up with a PACER methodology. It's called PACER, which stands for perspective, acceptance, community, endurance, and rest. And so the easiest and quickest way to shift your perspective is with gratitude. And it really gets you focused on what you can do instead of focusing on what you can't do. And it gets you focused on all the things that you get to do and all the things that you do have, because it's easy to spiral down, the path of, oh, woe is me, I'm in pain, or I can't walk. I mean, I remember there was a day I used to love to run, and my daughter's a runner, and she's wanted me to go for a run with her. And I looked at my husband and I was like, what a shame I can't go for a run. He's like, get on your bike and ride your bicycle beside her. And I was like, oh, yeah. And it just totally shifted my perspective on what I could do. Like, I could have sat there and had a pity party on, oh, wow, I can't run anymore. Poor me. But I was like, oh, well, what can I do? I can ride my bike. And the next part of PACER is acceptance. And I think acceptance and being aware of where you are, who you are on your journey, where you're going is so critical. It's the beginning of any transformation. When I got into an acceptance of, okay, well, this is a nerve disease that I've been dealt with, and these are the action steps I can take to go in the right direction. Because when you're in denial, which I was in denial for a long time, I was trying to pretend like I didn't have scars, I didn't have this nerve disease, and I wasn't taking the right medication, and I was spiraling down into a depression and then alcoholism, and then literally wanted to die. And so when you're in acceptance, it allows you to take action steps with grit and to move in the right direction. And it also allows you to connect with the right community. And that's the next part of PACER, which community is probably the most important part of PACER. Look, I tried to do it alone and it didn't work. I would not be a successful entrepreneur if I didn't have a great community. I'm a coach and I have a coach. I'm a mentor and I have a mentor. Um, I'm a sponsor and I have a sponsee. I am in a mastermind and I have my own mastermind. We all need, I mean, you don't have to do it alone. And when you come together, yeah, we're unstoppable. And so it's amazing. I think that success is built on relationships, and there is a lot of power in proximity. So it's so important to invest in yourself by connecting with the right people, whether that's hiring a coach or getting into the right rooms and conferences. Because it takes endurance, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're dealing with chronic pain or both, or you're a stay-at-home mom chasing around kids or a stay-at-home dad chasing around kids. Endurance is where your passion and your perseverance come into play. It's where you remember why you started, because I don't think we get burnout for doing the things we do. I think we get burnout for forgetting why we're doing the things that we're doing. And then the last part of PACER is rest, which was the hardest part for me. I was like, resting is for quitters. I'm not going to rest. Resting is for the weak. And I had to really shift my whole mindset that resting is, if you really want to be resilient, then you have to strategically plan times to stop and rest and recover. And I've made resting a part of my business strategy and really gone through and planned times to rejuvenate, to get enough rest. I plan times to space things out and don't overcommit anymore and spread myself too thin. I had a client, of mine that was like telling me, that our health again, and a friend of mine that was like, your health is the most important thing. And if I don't have my sobriety, if I don't have my health, then I can't serve others. And so that has to be top of the list so I can help others.
Should we all write down our goals and make ourselves accountable if we want to achieve certain things in life, including improving ourselves?
Heck yeah. The reason I say that is because I think there's such power in writing things down. And I will tell you, everything happens in divine timing. I mean, we do have to do the work. It's important to do the work. But the reason I say heck yeah is because I have had a sticky note written on my computer right here. It's the next title for my next book. And I have had it in mind, the publisher that I want to publish the book, the idea for the book, the title of the book, and I've had it written down. And I've been doing other things, but I've had this written down. It's like, this is what I'm going to get to. And it's here where I see it every single day. Do you know, I had that publisher reach out to me 2 days ago and they want a proposal. They're interested in the book. And I'm like, yeah. So if I had never written that down, if I didn't constantly go, okay, well, this is what I'd like to do. This is, something that I want to have in mind. And I didn't start writing things out to plan out the chapters and things, then how are we going to accomplish it? If you don't write it down. For me, I think it's very important to write it down. I also think it's very cathartic to write something down. It's very healing to write things down, and it's a good way to process things.
Are you looking for your next great gift to surprise a friend, colleague, or loved one? Bliss Beaches makes the perfect gift. This best-selling, bright and beautiful coffee table book by Randall Kaplan features stunning drone photography from exotic beach locations around the world. It's the perfect housewarming gift, a great addition to any home or office, and a fun and creative alternative to bringing a bottle of wine to somebody's house for dinner. Bliss Beaches is available for purchase on Amazon, where it has glowing reviews and a 5-star rating. Get your next amazing gift and order a copy of Bliss Beaches by clicking the link in our show notes. I have a personal business plan that I follow. I look at it. It's in my calendar. I look at it once a quarter. I pull it out. I read it. I make sure I'm alone in solitude, usually in my home office when everyone's asleep, or on the weekends when I have quiet time when my wife and our 2 young kids are not there. And it's very, very helpful. And a lot of the coaching that I do as well, and a lot of it centers around, I don't know what to do. I'm mid-career, I'm graduating college, and I have people do a checklist. I give them a written exercise. I tell them, write things down. And the exercise is basically a bunch of questions. And I'm not going to get into the whole thing here. But for example, what are the 5 best things you're good at? And what are the 5 worst things that you're bad at? And there's a set of 4 other questions like that I give them. And you think, okay, right out of the gate, well, that's simple. That's easy. One of them is, what are the 5 dream jobs you would like in your life? And what are the 5 worst jobs you could ever hope for or want in your life? And just by kind of chipping away at the edges and writing them down, I give them a week to do the exercise. I say, if this doesn't take you a long time, 20 hours, you're not doing it right. Because you write them down, you look. But I think it's so important to write down our goals. I had to write down mine. You think it in your head, yeah, I got this, but you don't have it, right? You have it if you're looking at it every day. And I just think it's been critical to my success. I've heard you say it's critical to yours as well. One of the other things that you said, I've never heard it said this way, but I love it, is put yourself on your own to-do list. What's that about? I think that's awesome advice.
Well, I end up a lot of times in the past, I have I have filled my whole day is filled with, doing other things. And as much as I love helping people, I will meet their needs first. I'm an overcoming people pleaser, an overcoming perfectionist. And so I'd spend all day jumping through hoops trying to help all these other people and taking care of what they were doing. And I learned this actually uh, in a very kind of radical way. Like I remember, so every year I do an event. It's called the Unstoppable Success Summit, and we have an annual event once a year. Like this year, I have John Gordon, Ben Newman, Rudy Ricksteins, Henry Amar, Rachel Luna, as well as some other panelists and mastermind members that are coming to speak at the event. And last time I had the event, I was so busy helping other people promote their event that when it came time to like, oh my gosh, my event's in a month, came time for me to promote it, it was like I'd been promoting so many other people's events and helping them with other stuff that when it came time for my own, it was like, oh, another event Amberly's promoting. You know what I mean? And so I was like, I got to make sure I take care of me so I can take care of having a roof over my head and taking care of my family and taking care of my health. But yeah, I mean, I've had to learn to put myself on my to-do list as far as what my business goals are. Like I got to get those things done first. Then I can help other people. And that might seem selfish, but I've learned the hard way that it doesn't work if you do it the other way. And then I've also learned to put my workouts on my to-do list. I put my workout in on my schedule. I put a lunch break on my schedule, even if that's a 15-minute little window, because before I would work straight through. I would train, or work with 12, 14 clients back to back to back. And you got to take care of yourself because you're setting an example for your clients and for others. And so when I say put yourself on your to-do list, it really means like really take care of yourself.
Shout out to John Gordon, who I sent a cold email to. I'm a big fan. He's written these amazing, amazing books. Great motivational
Oh, I
speaker.
love John.
Brilliant guy. And
you need to come to Dallas and hang out with us.
you tell me the date, and if I can make it, I'll make it. But John's one of those guys. I sent him a cold email. We did our podcast in person. We had a nice bond. He's become a good friend, and we talk about mentors. I'm relatively new to the podcast business, relatively new to the self-help business in terms of doing it in a professional way. And he's been a mentor to me and a great friend.
He's amazing.
A great friend.
He is
tremendous
amazing.
guy. And
actually,
Catherine's amazing as well. Catherine.
Yeah, actually, she was just here at the house. She was just here a couple of days ago.
She's
at the house. Yeah.
Shout out to both.
She's a part of my mastermind.
She's amazing. Let's switch gears. And I want to talk about the people we surround ourselves with. Can you tell us about doggy downers and puppy uppers? And as part of this, how important is it, regardless of where we are physically, mentally, or professionally in our lives, to surround ourselves with people who not only believe in us, but who also believe in our dreams?
Yeah, I always make a joke, and my husband will say, well, Amberly, you're the one that says get rid of the doggy downers and stick with the puppy uppers, if he can tell like there's even somebody in the family that's like bringing me down. But it's so true. Like there is nothing more powerful than being surrounded by like-minded people who are passionate and they're go-getters and they're not gossiping and they're focused on the good and they're focused on moving forward and they're focused on solutions and they're focused on collaborating. And so it's important to look at the people that you're surrounding yourself with. And that's not just the people that are in your life, but even the people on social media. Like, who are you scrolling through? If there's somebody on social media that you're looking and you're like, oh, they bring you down, or they make you feel bad, or you're all of a sudden imposter syndrome when you look at their stuff, it's like, then sometimes you got to bless them and block them.
Yeah.
And just nothing against them, but they don't make you feel good, you have to protect your peace. And so if you can't get rid of somebody that's in your life in person, maybe a family member, then learn to set healthy boundaries. And like, for instance, I've got some family members that it's like, I will go see them and I have a set time of I'm going to be here for 15 minutes to pay my respect, to say hello, to see if they need anything, and I'm out of here. I don't want them. There was one time I had some family members at the house and I had to excuse myself, go upstairs where I knew that they would not be able to walk up the stairs and just take a break. So I'm just very sensitive to people's energy. And there are some people that are just energy vampires and they will just suck it out of you. And I just want to be around people who, look, I'm not positive all the time. I have to work on it, but it certainly makes it easier when I'm around people who are focused on solutions instead of complaining and focused on the negative and the bad all the time.
I couldn't agree any more than couldn't agree anymore. I mean, we've all had people, family members, friends who are just taxing on our soul. And like you said, you
Mm-hmm.
cringe when you're going to see them or have a meeting, or they're going to be somewhere, and you just just say hello, and then you want to get out of there. And once you've done your thing, let's talk about superpowers and superheroes. You've said your greatest passion and purpose is to show others we all have this superhero that lives within us and that we have all this resilience within us. Is that really true? And how can you explain that to someone who's depressed and can't get out of bed in the morning, or has been diagnosed with a serious illness and think they're going to die, or are actually certain they're going to die?
Well, you know what? That's such a great question. And I think that when you're going through a really hard time, I want to acknowledge that it's hard. And I've been in that place where I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, oh, yeah, when I was waking up out of a coma, I was just positive and focusing on the superpower and resilience. There were times when I cried and cried. And even when I got out of the hospital, it was hard for my husband to see me cry. So when all the wounds were healed up enough to where I could get in the swimming pool, I would get in the swimming pool just so I could cry. So I thought, if I'm in the pool, they won't be able to see my tears. So it was hard, but I do feel like in those moments that if we think about gratitude, if we think about the things that do bring us joy, that have brought us joy, and if we think about achieving one small attainable goal in the day and we get through that and we celebrate that little victory, that little win, that can bring joy. I think that, when I was really lost thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I can't train clients anymore. What am I going to do? I really stopped and I asked myself, okay, well, what do I love doing? What brings me joy? What is something I know that I could do forever? And I would just get so much gratitude from it. And that was working with people. And so that's when I started, went back to school to get certified for coaching instead of just the physical training. And so I think it's important to also, for me, something I still do every single day is I have a gratitude practice. And I have a group of ladies, we call ourselves the God Squad, and we text each other every single day. In fact, we actually use an app now because it makes it easier. It's an app and you can go in and it says toolkit, and you go in the toolkit and you can write down 10 things you're grateful for. And we just send it in this group text. And it's one thing to really think about what you're grateful for. It's another thing to write it. It's another thing to express it and share it. But when you get to read what somebody else is grateful for, it just changes everything. I mean, the other day there was a friend of mine who she was grateful it was her last day of chemo. And I thought, I'm feeling down because I'm worried about this little minor thing that happened at work. And she's grateful that it's her last day of chemo. And so I think that, it's important, number one, to focus on what you can do to be of service, because, you know, whatever I could do in the hospital, which was make some phone calls, give guidance to the nurses who would come and collapse after a long shift next to my bed in the chair next to me, and talk to me about their problems and give them guidance. That gave me a sense of purpose, and being of service is what really helped me through a lot. And I think that we all have that superpower, and sometimes it might just come so naturally to us that we don't think it's a superpower, but it's something that other people might not be as gifted at it, but it just comes so easy to us. It's just something that we're good at. And so I would, if you don't know and you're having a hard time, I would go around to like 5 people and ask them, hey, what do you think my superpower is? What do you think is the thing that I'm really gifted at that I can offer the world? And just see what they say.
I think that's great advice. I've never heard anyone say it that way. And I think a lot of people think they don't have a superpower, but I think we all have individuals, hopefully, who we can look up to and we can ask. And that's true in the hospital. You can ask a nurse, you can ask a doctor. But I think that's fantastic advice. Let's go back to something we talked about earlier today, and that's sexual abuse. And I want to talk about its prevalence when divorced moms with children get remarried. And start with the crazy and maddening statistics that 17%, or 1 out of every 6 women who had a stepfather as a principal figure in her childhood, has been sexually abused by him. You were a victim of sexual abuse, as you talked
Wow.
about. That's a crazy stat. You were 12 years old when your stepdad sexually abused you. Can you tell us about that experience, how long it went on, what you did about it, how your mom and your real dad reacted to it when you told them, and how it influenced your future? And as part of that, can you tell us about the fear and the shame of telling others, like the PTA moms at school, knowing about this when you finally wrote about it?
Oh yeah. Well, my parents divorced when I was 7 or like 8, and my uh, mom and stepdad married right away. I mean, there was like hardly any time. They were just already together, and I was sexually abused by my stepfather. And for the longest time, I didn't tell anybody because he told me that he would kill my mom if I told anyone.
Jeez.
And so, and I believed him. He was kind of scary, and pretty really scary. And I finally, when I was probably about age 13, I finally got the nerve to go tell my dad. And I remember telling my dad, and it took so much courage because you have so much shame when you've been sexually abused. Like, I knew it wasn't right. And, but you've got this adult that's telling you that this is how dads teach their children, and you trust them, but in your gut you're like, this isn't right, but they're telling you it is right. And so it takes a lot of courage to finally tell somebody, especially when they've said they're going to kill your mom and you have so much shame. So I tell my dad, and my dad didn't do anything. So in that moment I realized a couple of things. Well, at first I thought, well, I'm just not worthy enough of protecting, or even loved enough to be protected. Because I know if somebody told me, I know if my daughter told me they were being sexually abused, I would probably be in jail or dead. Just saying. But,
I'm with
you
you on that
know,
one, by the way. That's
I mean, but later it was actually through writing about it in my book. And so I wrote the whole manuscript for my book, and I let my parents read it first. And I said, I want you to read this because I didn't write this book to hurt anyone, but I wanted to bring awareness. And I said, I want you to read it. I'll only publish this if you're completely comfortable with what I'm sharing. And my stepfather, by the way, had already passed away.
good
Um,
riddance. No,
and
no, no offense to anybody else, but good riddance.
yeah, he actually, uh, I don't write about this in the book, so I'll say it here. Once it did, he found out. So my dad didn't do
It's
anything.
crazy, by the way, that
I
your
what
dad didn't do anything. I think it's disgusting as well. I just can't imagine that.
he, he's like, well, you made me promise I wouldn't tell. And I was like, I was a little kid crying for help. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Um, when I was 23, I was going through a horrific divorce from an abusive relationship. I was married for a short while, and it was abusive, and it wasn't good. And he had done everything that he could to hurt me. He had cheated on me. He had called me names. He had beat me. He had done anything. He knew he couldn't do anything else. Like there was nothing else that he could do to hurt me. He had already done everything. And so I had confided in him that I was sexually abused, and I hadn't told anybody else. I had confided in him. He called my mom and said, do you know what your husband did to my wife? And so that's how my mom found out. I was 23 years old, and I got on the phone with my mom, and she said, Amberly, is it true? And I was like, yeah. And we got off the phone, and she said that she went over to my stepdad. He was asleep on the couch, and she punched him and my mom is like a Southern belle. She's the sweetest thing you've ever met. And she punched him as hard as she could. And she goes, so is it true what you did to Amberly? And he couldn't say a word. And so she goes, well, so then I guess it is. And she left. She came to California to be with me. She got back. He left, like packed a bag, left most of his stuff there, and was on the run forever, never paid her alimony, like couldn't find him. He ended up living about an hour from me in California. And there were times when I felt this eerie, like, somebody staring at you,
Yeah.
and I always wondered, is that him? Is he around? And maybe it was, but he ended up dying of testicular cancer. Ain't karma a bitch?
Well, I have goosebumps as
I hate to say that, but hate to say that, but
when you
that's
tell that
terrible of me.
story. By the way, I'm sorry you had to go through all that. That's horrific. I can't imagine. But I had goosebumps on my whole body as you were telling me that story. Hopefully there are some lessons in that it made you stronger. But for all the people out there who are being abused physically, mentally, verbally, please get help. So many people don't
Yeah.
reach out. They're afraid. They're ashamed. They don't know what to do. I have a very good friend who was sexually abused as a child by a stepfather. She didn't tell people for years and years and years, and went through so much therapy, and it really affected her life in a very negative way. She's my age. I'll be 55 in a couple weeks, and she still deals with it every day. So please go get help.
I mean, it's an ongoing thing, and I'm not going to sit here and say I'm completely healed. I
Yeah.
still sometimes get triggered. But now, instead of like reacting and spiraling down into bad habits or behaviors or coping mechanisms, I can go, okay, why am I triggered from this situation? And what are the tools that I can use to get through it? And, I remember going to a therapist years ago. I was in my 20s, and she actually said, and I wasn't in there I wasn't in there to talk to her about sexual abuse. I was in there to talk about a relationship. And she goes, were you sexually abused? And I was like, well, yeah, but I've dealt with that. I've healed from that. I've dealt with that. She goes, no, you haven't. And she's like, you need to read this book and do this and this. And it was like, I did a lot of healing through therapy, through reading, through self-development, through journaling, through writing. But I have to say, writing my book and writing about the sexual abuse was very cathartic. It was like, it took me down kind of a hard path, but it was actually very cathartic. And you know what? I remember getting the box of books delivered to the house, and my husband looked at the book, and he looked at the back of the book, and he was like, oh my gosh, it says that survivor of sexual abuse. And I was like, he goes, I can't believe they put that on the book. I said, honey, I write about it in the book. You might want to read the book. And I had this twinge of like, oh my gosh, now all the PTA moms are going to know. They're going to like, it was, I've had more people reach out to me, including PTA moms and PTA dads, by the way, that have come up to me and whispered in my ear, thank you for writing about that. Now I don't feel like I have to walk around in shame. I can have the dignity and grace and move forward. So thank you for writing that.
Amen. Amen. That's amazing. This episode of In Search of Excellence is brought to you by Sandee.com. SANDEE.com. We're a Yelp for beaches and have created the world's most comprehensive beach resource by cataloging more than 100 categories of information for every beach in the world, more than 100,000 beaches in 212 countries. Sandee.com provides beachgoers around the world with detailed, comprehensive, and easy-to-use information to help them plan their perfect beach getaway at home and abroad, and to make sure you're never disappointed by a beach visit again. Plan the perfect beach trip today by visiting Sandee.com. That's www.sandee.com. The link is in our show notes. Stay sandy, my friends. Yeah, we're talking about overcoming obstacles and so many things we do on our path to success. Therapy is very important. I have a therapist. I encourage everyone to have a therapist. My therapist is like my coach. But as we think about how we become successful, one thing that I like to talk about, you've talked about it a little bit, is the importance of preparation. You talked about it when we talked about PACER. But I have a new term for preparation. It's called extreme preparation. It's what has made me successful, one of the most important ingredients. I'm talking about a different kind of preparation. When someone prepares 2 hours for something, I will prepare 40 hours for something. I always want to make sure I'm the most prepared person in the room. And it's amazing what extreme preparation does for people. I'm writing a book called Extreme Preparation. That's one of the things
You
I am.
are.
Yes, I love teaching techniques that can actually make a difference in people's lives. Can you give some examples in your life how extreme preparation has made you successful or a better person?
Yeah, I think I learned that from being an athlete and a dancer. And, I was never the best dancer. I got into athletics and tried out for the team like the last day that was like the day they were like, okay, today you're going to run to see if you qualify to be on the track team. Um, and so I, I always had to work a little harder. I was always good at the grit. I could outwork, out prepare, outlast. I just worked really, really hard. And so for me, even if it's something as far as like a health goal, or if it's something like when I prepared for my TEDx talk, by the time I got to my TEDx talk, I was the only speaker that didn't have a PhD. And I remember the website came up, and my husband was like, wow, you're the only one that doesn't have a PhD. I'm like, yeah, I kind of noticed that. I'm the only one that doesn't have a college education. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to practice. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to prepare more. And when I got backstage for that TED talk, it was my first big talk on a stage. I'd never talked on a stage like that. Everybody was freaking out backstage, like seriously freaking out. People were pacing back and forth and like talking to themselves. And it was crazy. And I was just kind of walking around looking like, I had done the preparation. So I was ready to go. Yeah, I did my push ups and prayer backstage before I went on, but I was ready to go because I had put in the work to prepare for that day. And I think that when you prepare, it gives you the confidence to go for it.
There's so much to this we could talk about. I mean, my book's going to be 350 pages, so I could talk about this for a month. But there's so
well, we're going to have you on the show on True Grit and Grace and talk about your book. When is your book coming out?
hopefully it probably won't be till the end of next year. I've missed every deadline that we've had. So
yeah.
Naren, if you're listening, I'm getting it done. but it's tough. We talk about preparation. I'm also preparing, as I mentioned, to go out and do some paid corporate speaking on the same topic. I'm memorizing a 37-page speech right now, and I work on it every day and work on it every morning.
37-page speech, you're memorizing
it's 60 minutes. So, I mean, that's what the companies want, but there's a lot packed in there.
Wow.
But I don't know how much time I spent preparing on this so far. Writing it took forever, and then I practice every day and memorize.
And you know what? That's a thing that people don't understand. They think a lot of times, oh, you're getting 15K to go do this talk.
Yeah.
And it's like, first of all, it was the years of learning the lessons to even be able to put together the talk, and then the stress of putting together. And I say stress because I want to do a good job.
Right.
So the hardest part for me sometimes is just like coming up with my opening, or, and then practicing and practicing and practicing. It's all the reps that you get in before that you actually go do the job.
So, Amberly, we've already talked about extreme preparation, which has been one of the hallmarks of my career and my success. And you've explained some of your experience with extreme preparation. But let's go back and talk about, in your view, what does it take to be successful? What are 3 to 5 ingredients when you think about the word success?
I really think in order to be successful, you have to know your why, like why you're doing it. In fact, I just finished writing a book proposal for a new book, and I was explaining to the publisher that it was like, when I first started and was working on my first book, I had people that told me, you need to stick to fitness. You don't have a college education. I didn't even own a computer, to be honest with you. Like 6 years ago, I didn't even own a computer. But I had a why, and I thought there has to be a reason in all that I've been through that can serve pain to purpose and help other people. And so I think knowing your why is very important, because that's going to be your driving force. And I don't think that people get burnout from doing the things that they do, but I think they get burnout from forgetting why they started and why they're doing the things that they do. So I think it's remembering their why. I think it's having a strong community and having support with connection. I could not do it alone. I tried it and it didn't work. And I think that community is important. So get involved in a mastermind that you can brainstorm with. You can have that collaborations. You can support each other, but also get with the right community and seek counsel and not opinion. So what I mean by that is, like, when you tell somebody your big dreams or your goals, and perhaps they've never written a book, they're like, you can never write a book. What? Write a book? That's impossible. But if you ask someone who has already written a book, who's published several books, they're like, oh, of course, this is of course what you can do. These are the steps you need to take. So take step A, B, and C, and you get good counsel on that instead of opinions on people who've never done the thing that you want to do. And then I think it's important to stick to your non-negotiables, which is like, when I have started to fail, or when I've started to burn out, or when I've started to go back into healthy habits, is when I've stopped doing my non-negotiables, which everybody has their non-negotiables. Mine is prayer and gratitude practice, and working out and connecting and being with my family, and other things. But knowing your non-negotiables and sticking to that, so you can have sustainable success.
I want to switch gears for a minute, and I want to talk about the dangerous things millions and millions and hundreds of millions of people knowingly do. Many millions of us like driving more than 100 miles an hour at times, even more if we have faster cars, and seeing how fast our cars go. Many millions of people like racing from 0 to 60, or love racing someone when the light turns green from a red light. We talk about
I know
complete
it.
stupidity. 9.1% of people don't wear seatbelts, and 50% of traffic deaths come from people who are not wearing them. Here's a statistic. In 2021, seatbelts saved an estimated 14,955 lives, and could have saved the lives of an additional 2,549 people if they had been wearing seatbelts. Now let's talk about motorcycles. There are 9 million motorcycle riders in the United States and more than 200 million around the world. As of last year, 19 states and the District of Columbia had universal helmet laws requiring all motorcyclists to wear a helmet, while the other 31 states had partial helmet laws, which only require certain riders to wear helmets, usually based on age. In the US, approximately 70% wear helmets and 30% don't, which means 3 million people in the United States ride without them. In 2021, 6,084 people in the United States died from motorcycle crashes. Motorcyclists account for 14% of all crash-related fatalities in the United States, even though they were only 3.5% of the vehicles on the road. Motorcyclists are 24 times more likely than passenger vehicle occupants to die in a car crash, and 40 times more likely than light truck occupants. And as you know, there's no sense of freedom with the sun. There's no sense of freedom like when the wind is blowing in your face and you can feel the wind through your hair on a sunny day. I have a boat up in Coeur d'Alene. I love it. We speed through the water when it's glass. The hair is blowing in your face. Why are people knowingly taking this risk when they know it's so dangerous?
Well, I think a lot of motorcyclists know, because I got a lot of friends with motorcycles, and you know that you're either going down or, I mean, there's always a chance you're going down. But there is nothing like the freedom of riding in the wind, and that with the wind blowing through your hair, and being on the bike. And I think part of it is because as a motorcyclist, you're so focused on being in the present. You're so focused on your surroundings. It's not like when you're in a car, and I hate to admit this, but I've texted while I've been driving. I know people are going to hate me for that, but I mean, I do have my car on autopilot, which doesn't make it any better. I know that. I know it. But when you're on a motorcycle, you are fully in the present. And the only other thing I can describe that gives me the same present moment of being in that is when I'm boxing and sparring. And when I'm boxing and I'm hitting the mitts, I'm not thinking of anything else except for not getting hit in the face and hitting the mitts. And but it's crazy to me to see out here in Texas, because I lived in California where helmet law was mandatory. In Texas, it's not. And I'm like, oh my God, they're riding without a helmet. That is crazy. That is just crazy. And did you know that the best organ donors out there they come from motorcyclists? And the reason being is because most motorcyclists are younger. They have no previous illnesses or anything like that, but they have died in a horrible crash. But there are some of their organs that can be salvaged. And so I don't know why people continue to do it. I can say that, my husband still has his Texas chopper sitting in the garage, but he lost his confidence to ride after my motorcycle accident, and he stopped riding. He was a CHP motor sergeant, and he stopped. He stopped riding as a profession, and then he stopped riding his motorcycle because he knew what a good rider I was. And I'm not saying that to make myself say, I was such a good rider. He knew what a safe rider I was. And that at any moment, man, when God's got your ticket, you're done. Like when your time's out, there's nothing you can do. It's done. You're done. And I think that it's scary nowadays with motorcyclists, especially in LA where we lived. So many people texting on the phone, so much traffic, so much going on. Like I was completely going only 25 miles an hour when somebody T-boned me that wasn't paying attention, that was just in a hurry. And so I would encourage people to really think about what's important to them. For me, people ask me all the time, well, are you going to ride again? And I don't know, I have not had a desire to ride again. Now, I take that back. I have had a moment of like, oh man, I miss my bike. I'd love to get back on. It's not worth it to me. My family is too important to me. My health is too important to me. Going through 34 surgeries was way too hard to ever think. If anything happened, if I barely went down on a bike again, I would lose my leg. And I've
Yeah.
worked too hard to save it.
My mom, when I was younger, I was dying for a moped. I was 13, 14. A bunch of kids had them. She wouldn't let me. I'm glad in hindsight that she didn't. When I was in college, and I mentioned on this podcast already, we did the Eurail Pass. We're driving around. We're taking trains around Europe. And I remember
I did that.
I remember standing on a street corner, waiting for the light to turn. And the next thing I knew, and it happened so fast, you almost don't even believe it's happening when you see it. I remember the motorcycle going, and I remember a car just running a red light, didn't see it. And the guy just went flying, and I don't know how far he flew in the air. You could hear the thud when it hit him, and it was traumatic. I didn't go over and look at what had happened. Obviously, people rushed over there, and there was a big commotion, but I see riders in LA where you've lived. I see people zooming in and out of traffic. You're going 70 miles per hour, and you're going the speed limit, and people are just flying in between you. Rush hour, they're flying 50 miles per hour.
Well, I think, you know what,
Crazy.
though, too? Like, I think that because I grew up on dirt bikes, and I grew up on dirt bikes. My first available transportation was I had a moped, and that's how I got to school. And then I had an 883 Harley Sportster, and then my next motorcycle was a 1200 cc Sportster. I didn't know, because it's what I grew up with. I didn't know that, like, how unsafe that it could be. I guess I was always a bit of an adrenaline junkie.
Yeah.
And loved pushing the pace. And I'll never forget, there was one time on Sunset Boulevard in California, I was at a stoplight right on Sunset, and there was this Porsche that came up next to me, and they were like, "You want to race?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, I want to race." And I raced them, and I won. And I remember doing crazy stuff on my bike. This is before kids. When you're younger and you're like feeling like you're invincible, like you don't think about death or harm, or I didn't anyway. And I remember going up like PCH at 130 miles an hour, like as fast as my bike would go. And it was a thrill. It was amazing. I can't imagine doing anything like that now, but I think a lot of it was the fact that I grew up on dirt bikes, and I grew up with a like a scooter that was so cool. It was bright red with a bright red helmet. I always wore a helmet, but this accident changed everything for me and for my husband, for sure, for my whole family.
Yeah. By the way, we have 8 minutes, so let's go very quick, maybe 2 minutes max on these final two questions, if we can, because I want to make sure that we get it in. So after you nearly died on a motorcycle, would you advise people not to ride a motorcycle today, given what happened to you?
Yeah, I would say if you're going to ride a motorcycle, do it in the middle of nowhere with no traffic and wear a helmet.
So,
And you know what? Like, people are going to do what they're going to do. It's like my husband hasn't sold his motorcycle. He rarely rides it. I mean, rarely rides it. And you can't force anybody to do anything, but you can only offer like your experience to share with them that how bad it can go.
when you look back at everything you've been through and nearly dying and the deep despair and depression and having no money to where you are today, getting up on stage and doing a TED talk viewed by 1 million people and having people follow you on Instagram. What's the feeling when you're up on stage and you're giving back and people are listening to you and you're changing lives?
Oh, thank you. That's such an awesome question. Well, the best part of my whole journey and the reason I do what I do is for connection. And me being able to get on stage is because I love, ever since I was a little girl, I've loved when I was a young dancer and I could see people out in the audience that would smile when they would see me dance and I could bring them joy. Now it's just moved into something completely different. Now I'm on stage, but I get to share my experience, strength, and hope and see it how it transforms people's lives and they get that spark of joy or transformation and being able to connect with them in communities. That's been the most amazing part of my whole journey. So that's what I love about what I get to do. And the reason why I do what I do is because I love the connection with others, because for so long I felt so alone in my journey and what I was doing and my struggles and in pain. And when we connect with others and we get to share our experience and go, oh my gosh, me too, I relate with that, then together we're unstoppable.
So speaking about being on stage, tell us about Hammer Time and MC Hammer.
Oh my goodness. So that was fun. I moved to California despite everybody saying, oh, you'll never make it as a dancer. Who do you think you are? You are going to be back in 2 weeks to Texas. Like LA, Hollywood's going to eat you up. Well, a month later, I auditioned for the MC Hammer music video and got it. So I got to be on a music video with MC Hammer. And I was like, oh, I've made it. I'm in heaven. It was a 23-hour shoot. And I remember, like, after about 20 hours laying on stage with MC Hammer and his crew going, I can't believe I'm here. Like, this is amazing. And then afterwards, people in Texas that doubted me go, oh my God, I knew you could always do it. We knew you had it in you. And I was like, so that was like the start of my career as a dancer. And from then it went on to traveling all over the world dancing and several other music videos with like Collective Soul and Melissa Etheridge and so many more. It was so much fun.
Before we finish today, I want to go ahead and ask some more open-ended questions. I call this part of my podcast, Fill in the Blank to Excellence. Are you ready to play?
Yeah, let's do it.
The biggest lesson I've learned in my life is
To trust my gut,
my number one professional goal is
to make the biggest impact I can.
my biggest regret in my life is
Not trusting my gut.
the one thing I've dreamt about doing for a long time is
Writing my next book.
if you could go back in time, what's the one piece of advice you would give to your 21-year-old self?
To believe in myself, to stop believing in the boyfriend that I had at the time that told me I wasn't good enough, who shamed me for wanting to be a professional dancer and shamed me for wanting to be a fitness instructor. to believe in myself and stop believing my stepfather who abused me and told me I would never amount to anything, to believe in myself and stop believing my stepmom who said I'm making a big mistake, and to just believe in myself. I think when we believe in ourselves, that we can achieve unsurmountable goals.
Someone once told me the most powerful words in the English language, the four most powerful words are "I believe in you." I think it's so important when you have somebody who believes in you telling
Oh,
you that they back you.
yeah.
I think it's, if you could
And
meet,
you know what? Thank you for saying that, because, right before this, I just got off of a call with one of my coaching clients, and I had to have a kind of a come to Jesus call with her, because I was like, you got to get yourself in gear. And I was like, I believe in you, because I really do. I was like, I believe in you. And she's like, thank you. Your belief in me means everything. And it does. When you have somebody believe in you, sometimes that's all you need, is a little bit of somebody to believe in you before you can believe in yourself.
if you could meet one person in the world, who would it be?
Brad Pitt.
Are you doing anything to try to meet him?
Oh, no, I don't know. I haven't really, but maybe Brad Pitt, I'm sure, is listening to this episode,
I'm sure he
and
is.
I'm
He
sure he's
calls
going
me
to
every
want to
night,
come.
check in with me, and he calls.
Yeah, yeah,
We're
yeah.
tight.
Yeah, Brad Pitt, I kind of like him. No, I like his sobriety story. Okay, I really think he's hot too, okay?
The one
Is
question,
that terrible that I say that?
it's
That I
not
said
terrible.
that?
It's not terrible. We all have crushes on certain people. I've got a crush on my Peloton instructor. I mean, she's no longer there, but I was very excited once when, she liked one of my photos. I'm happily married. I love my wife more than anything, but it's like,
You're like, oh my God, she liked my photo.
yeah, I don't think that's bad
Yeah.
at all. What's the one question you wish I asked you but didn't?
Oh my goodness, are you kidding me? You ask the best questions ever. Like, this has been the most amazing podcast interview. I can understand why people love you and they love your podcast. And I feel like after this experience that you're a good friend of mine. And so I appreciate you and all your questions. And I really couldn't ask for anything more. You're amazing.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. I greatly appreciate that. I do pride myself on my preparation. It's really amazing when people do their prep, the immediate level of respect that people give you. And I do so much coaching on this, and all of my mentees and people I coach all know I preach it. And as I mentioned, I'm writing a book called Extreme Preparation, but I greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate the compliment. I also feel like we're friends. I know we're going to be lifelong friends. I look forward to meeting you in person. You have an amazing, inspirational story. I'm inspired just listening to you and doing all the work. So thank you for being here. I want everyone to go out, listen to your TED Talk, buy your book, and go to your mastermind. So Amberly, you're awesome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. And you know what? We need to have you on my podcast with your new book.
I'd love to be on it. I'm behind, like I
We
said.
got to shout your book out. So I want to have you on True Grit and Grace
It's
to
amazing.
promote your book. When is your book coming out?
Probably by the end of next year. I'm way behind. So as I mentioned, but
Okay,
hopefully
well,
by
we'll
the end of
do it.
next
When
year.
it comes out, we'll do it. We'll
I
have everybody listen to your interview, and I will do lots of preparation. But before then, we will have probably hung out in person and had a good time. And yeah,
for sure. Take care, and I look forward to speaking soon and meeting soon as well. I appreciate you. Thank you again.